Hi, thank you, Robin. Hello to you all. Welcome back to those of you that made the session on the 22nd of April. And for those of you that are joining and meeting me for the first time, hello. I am Sam Redman. I run my own consultancy where I help individuals and organisations explore, identify what they want to change to reach their full potential. And prior to setting up my consultancy in July 2019, I helped excuse me, I led the agenda on leadership, talent and culture at Pret. I'm delighted that you're all here, and I want to say a huge thank you to all of you that submitted questions. I've taken those into account and curated some material for you today. Now, as last time, I'm going to keep things quite fast-paced, and please do, as Robin has just said, throughout the webinar, submit your questions. And then I've made some time at the end so that I can answer any further questions that crop up through today's webinar. So what did you ask for? There were a number of themes, and I have to say there was quite a high volume of questions. So it was an interesting way to try and bucket out what it was you were looking for. So here you can see that there was a number of questions around how do I create a growth mindset? Well, at the moment, I feel like I'm just coping. There was a number of questions around how do I map a change in career? And to be honest, a number of clients have contacted me recently asking the same question. And I wonder whether the environment we are in is that getting us to question what's really important to us. So I've added in some content to help with that. Yeah, the last webinar really concentrated on your own growth mindset. And a number of you asked, how do you reach that out? How do you influence others to also have a growth mindset? And then finally, we talked quite a bit about goals, and you wanted to know, well, how and when and how and why should I review those? So I've put some information in the webinar today to help you with that. So let's have a look at today's agenda. So the first thing I'm going to do for you guys today is to look about how do we create this growth mindset in others. The second piece is around that personal development plan maintenance. Two things to look at here. Are they top tips about how we create great goals? But secondly, how do we continue with our growth when the environment around us is uncertain? And building on that, I then want to close with a piece around what is going now and how to start thinking about what's going to be important in your future. So let's start with how we create a growth mindset in others. So I want you to think about your version of a growth mindset, because your version of your growth mindset is very individual to you, and it may look very different in other people. I suppose in the simplest terms, we talk in development about introverts versus extroverts. So your version of your growth mindset isn't necessarily going to look the same as anybody else's. So what I've done for you today is I've added in a model to help you really understand why people are individuals. And this is called the Iceberg Model. Now, the Iceberg Model is based on a phrasing that Ernest Hemingway brought in, which was a small part of an iceberg is actually visible. The stories that he presented, only a small part of what was actually happening was explained in the book. The rest was left to the individual to interpret for themselves. Now, if we think about an iceberg, and we're not going to go into global warming today, so no arguments about this bit, but if we think about it as a principle, actually, the iceberg, the top of the iceberg is probably only 10 or 20% of what we actually see. And if we relate this to a person, the things that we actually see are factual. So we will see things like their body language, how they choose to dress, the level of eye contact that they give us, the phrases that they use, the actions that they take, and the words that they use to bring into a conversation. Now, all of that is factual. So if you think today, well, Sam's wearing a orange and teal coloured blouse, that's great, that's the fact. But if you then think, well, Sam's wearing an orange and teal coloured blouse and actually it looks a bit dressy for what she's doing today, that's your opinion that's being laid in. So everything that's above the surface of the water can be summarised as behaviour, and we know it's behaviour because it's a fact. But what's important about this model is that the majority of what's going on with an individual is hidden from view. So if we look at the kind of things that can be hidden from view, we've got here relationships, people's hopes and fears, their family, their personal history, their education. For some people, their health is hidden from view, their life experiences, and maybe their finances to a certain degree. Now, all of that is terminology, and we've all experienced elements of this in our life. So we've all had relationships, but my experience of being in a relationship will be very different to yours. And therefore, that creates our individuality. And all of those things come together to form what we call our values and beliefs. Now, the key to this model is everything that's going on beneath the surface is driving what we see above it. So it is driving the behaviours that we see. Now, the more time you spend with somebody, that watermark's going to drop, isn't it? The more time that you give people permission to speak freely, to be themselves, then that watermark's going to drop. You're going to see probably 40, 50%. And I've been in a relationship with my partner for 10 years, and I would think that watermark's low, but I don't know all about him, and nor would I want to, because the element of surprise is great. So my advice to you here is, when we think about creating that growth mindset in others, just ask yourself, are they displaying a growth mindset? What does that mean to them, rather than how you approach your own growth mindset? And I would also say that we can be guilty of unconscious bias, where somebody has done something and that creates that first impression that is immovable. And therefore, no matter what they do in the future, in the back of our head, we always go back to that one moment where we really created what we thought is a solid viewpoint. So my advice to you is to think about how you can spend time with people to really understand what a growth mindset means to them. And within that, I would think about looking at the catalogue of courses and for the webinars that IGD have put together. There's an amazing one coming up on coaching. And I'd ask you to think about, how can you get yourself into the space where you're asking more questions than you're telling the answers? So let's have a look at a reminder of the growth mindset from the webinar in April. So I want you to think about, as a reminder, when situations come up that are new, how do you and others approach them? So when there's a challenge, do you embrace it? Do you move towards it? Or do you avoid it and try and find something else to do? Become really helpful with something you know is a little bit more comfortable to you, rather than stepping into the unknown and embracing the chance to learn something new. When obstacles come up, do you persist? Do you think, well, okay, so this didn't work and this is going to be tough, but however, what if we tried this? What if we did this differently? And I know that in the past 6 to 8 weeks, there's been some amazing creativity out there about how we're spending our time. Or is there a tendency to just give up and just lock the door, close the curtains, and just wait for all of this to blow over? That can change depending on how much effort you put into things. So do you put effort in? Do you learn from what we call criticism, when people are trying to give you information you don't necessarily want to hear or you've invited, but is there something in there that could help you continue to grow? Or do you ignore it and do you throw an opinion at it, just say, no, they don't know what they're talking about? When you see the success of other people, do you find lessons and inspiration? I'm going to touch on that a little bit more in a second. Do you feel threatened? Do you feel that they're kind of, better than you, or they're trying to take some spotlight away from you, or comparisonitis, that you just don't think that you're going to be anywhere near as good, so therefore you shy away from the growth aspect? And as a result, those with a growth mindset tend to reach higher levels of achievement, and those higher levels of achievement can be something that's not even predicted. Or you can fail to reach your full potential. Now, from a personal experience, in the last 6 to 8 weeks, if you told me that all of my offer was going to be done online with a little small camera and pretty much talking to myself a lot because I'm the only person that I can see, I would have run for the hills. And I have to say, the adrenaline and the nerves that go with that have been quite tough sometimes. But now I'm feeling a little bit more competent at it. It means that I can continue reaching out to people and supporting them, and gives me the breadth to speak to. And I'm just looking at the number now, 149 people from the comfort of my own kitchen. So let's have a look at how we can create a growth mindset in others. So my top tips for you are: create an atmosphere of honesty, dialogue and risk. And those risks should be calculated risks that have been discussed beforehand. So if you were to do this, What do you see could possibly go wrong, and how would you deal with that? Now, I would ask you to consider that this works at a peer level, and it also works with your more senior people that you work with. Because if you feel that they are offering you a fixed mindset when you come up with ideas, ask them, what is it that you think could go wrong? What are your concerns in this area? What can I do to mitigate those? But don't try and shy away from the piece of honesty, because if you are being truly honest, then whatever information you receive back from that is going to give you something that you really, really need. The second piece is around celebrating mistakes as an opportunity to learn. Now, if you are within a peer group, this is so helpful. And I talked last time as not liking the word weakness. I don't like the word mistake either, because again, I think they're areas of development and spaces where you can really learn and grow. So find the balance and learn from others. Talk about what went well and what you would do differently next time. And I'd also think about your wider organisations that you work in. Have another team done something really well, or a team done something that they've had to learn from pretty quickly? You can bring that into the dialogue with your peer group and with your senior leadership team and say, well, you know what, this happened, what can we learn from that? What could we take forward as elements that will benefit us in the future to grow? The next piece is super important. Share your story and lead by example. You're encouraging other people to be human too, to talk about you and your time, what has worked and what you have learned from, because there's always elements where other people can benefit from your own experiences. The next one is praise attitude, not just skills and competencies. It's a real good to have a balance between recognizing the amount of input that somebody's put into something rather than just the output, because that is the attitude that you want to repeat. If somebody's going out there taking calculated risks, stepping into the unknown, this is where growth comes from. So make sure that when you are talking to people and they're sharing their review of how their experiences have gone, make sure that you pick up, well, you know what, you went in there with a really good intention, rather than, well, did you go in there with the right data? I know which one I'd pay more attention to, because if I didn't have the right data at the time, I probably already know that. And then finally, coach individuals to see the opportunities and problem solve. And this comes back to what I've just shared. That is, listen more than you speak. There's a reason why you've been given 2 of these and 1 of these. Therefore, go with the thing that's going to take less pressure. Use your ears rather than this. It's amazing how individuals already have thought about what they would do differently next time. And it's about giving them the space to be heard. Okay. So again, if you have any questions on this, please start submitting them now, and hopefully I'll have enough time at the end to answer as many as I possibly can. So now we're going to move on to a personal development plan maintenance. A number of you asked for some tips around how to keep these on track, what to do when you're not necessarily completely working as you would do before, or having the opportunities that you had done before, because we're isolating at the moment and our time is restricted. And I've brought together, back from the webinar that I shared with you in April, my own coaching model around how I support my clients to track and navigate their goals. So there are 3 key areas to look at, and I would ask you to think about career. Where are you? Your relationships, which ones are providing you with the energy to grow and which ones are maybe not doing that so much. Your health, how are you? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more towards the end. So I really like your feedback. I think somebody picked up on the fact that I'd said, you know, right now, you're probably not in a position to set 12 months goal, and that's okay. So is it more realistic for you right now to be setting 3-month goals that you can review? Or is it more useful for you to now work on monthly goals until you're a little bit more closer to navigating that bigger picture future? So this will be in the webinar for you in the recording, and you can review this as a piece of homework if you've not done it before. So my top tips around personal development plan maintenance are as follows. Make time for your goals. They're yours. Make time for your development. So my first tip, and I have this myself, I call it my green hour, is that you put an hour a week in your calendar. So therefore, and color code it so it's really clear that it's for you. So that therefore you receive a reminder and make it non-negotiable. So put it in a time of the week where you know that it's very rare that you get meeting invites, so there's no business as usual activities. So for me, mine's on a Friday just after lunch, and it gives me time to reflect on my week. The other thing I do with it is if there's an event or something that I want to do, I will accrue those hours. So sometimes I will take off half an hour of one of my green hours and add it to another one so that I can attend a webinar. But that time really is for you to reflect on how you're progressing. Use prompts and motivation givers. So in your calendar, if you are constantly on Outlook, which most of us are, to keep in touch with our colleagues, to keep in touch with friends and family, then put in there, if you know there's a significant event coming up, if you've got a presentation to do in a virtual meeting, if you have got a call that you need to make that you've not really been looking forward to, then put something in your calendar that crops up and reminds you and gives you something to think about that's positive. Remind you about why you're doing what you're doing. Remind you of what you're hoping to get out of it and how people are going to benefit from what it is you're going to share. And then equally, you might want to put one that crops up after you've had the experience to say, well, how did that go? Well done. If you're old school like me and you don't necessarily want to use your Outlook, then Post-it notes are great. My fridge, sometimes my daughter goes to my fridge and sort of says, what does this mean? And it's like, well, it won't mean anything to you, but it means a great deal to me. And it will be something in there that will be supportive or remind me about why I'm doing something. And my other one is if I've got something quite big, like launching webinars that I'm doing, then the night before I will put a Post-it note on my bathroom mirror so that when I'm cleaning my teeth in the morning, it is the first thing that I see in order to set me up for the day. Use a tool to reflect on your learning and recognise process. So again, I would recommend that you have reflection time weekly, but you do a more solid review of your progress monthly. So on the fourth Friday or whenever you do your reflection time, that you take that time to review your progress. Now, I would recommend using the SWOT that I shared with you in the last webinar, but you may have a tool that your organisation uses that you tend to go back to when you're coming up for maybe more formal reviews, like your quarterly appraisals or your annual appraisals, so that the language is building up for those conversations nearer the time. But it is great if you can start building up a catalogue of progress, because it feels really good when you go back to day one and go, God, I can't believe I started off there. Look at where I am now. Acknowledge your wins and learns. What was unexpected? Think about that growth mindset. What came out of it that you hadn't really thought that was possible? There will always be new stuff in there because we can't control it. We can't control other people. So therefore, if we are interacting with other people or other experiences, there will be something in there that was unexpected that you can learn from. Somebody in their questions referred to, how do I take a step forward when I'm fearing failure? Failure is where we learn, and again, I probably want to rebrand that, much like my weaknesses and mistakes. I'd wonder what that fear was coming from and really go back, think about your own personal iceberg. When did this become a fact for you? What was that experience? And it probably takes a bigger conversation. However, it's a starting point. So I would think about failure. If we are bound by successes, I think this is a better way to say it. So when we do something really well, we tend to repeat that behavior because it's nice and it's safe and it feels good and it's risk-free. It's the elements where things don't go so well or as predicted is the space that we learn the most. And most successful people in the world are successful and will have many stories to tell you about when the unexpected occurred. And you only have to watch a few TED Talks to listen to the spaces where people did have their breakthroughs. And it wasn't because things were going 100% well. It was because things weren't going so well. And then therefore the breakthrough happened. And then my final top tip with your PDP maintenance is to share it with a sponsor. talking is good, and I know I'm spending my time here talking just to my face on your webinar, but talking is amazing, and sponsors are so useful. I've had a sponsor for about 3 years, and the way that I selected my sponsor, or mentor you may want to call them, is that I wanted to work with somebody who would challenge me. So pretty much my opposite type. So where it would be easy for me to work with somebody and go, yeah, Sam, that's great. You know, I'm not going to move forward. But if I work with somebody who's quite challenging, so I would share my thoughts on something and they'd say, I don't get it. Explain that further. And it really pushed me to start thinking more creatively about what it was I was trying to achieve and how I would take, you know, as a leader, how I would take people on that journey with me. So I would think about who is around you, who is in your circle of influence that could sponsor you, and equally you could return the favour, because I know that whilst my sponsor was more senior than I was in the organisation that I worked for, we're now on a pretty much equal footing in our one-to-ones, which are virtual at the moment. But you know, it's not very clear who's leading the conversation at any given point, because we're having a really great dialogue. So think about somebody you can share your progress with that will not only challenge you, but will also keep you accountable for what it is that you want to achieve. And then my last piece today before we move into the Q&A is about now and the future. So there was language, and I shared it in your language at the beginning of the webinar today, around coping. And we are coping. We are coping, and I think there's a lot we should be very, very proud of at the moment, because we're not in control of everything, and that can be quite a daunting place to be. And I wanted to sort of take it back to a basics approach, really, to help you really think about what it is that's really important to you. We have been living in a culture of consuming. So consuming data, consuming food, consuming, I don't know about you, but I'm about handbags and shoes, but we've been consuming, and all of a sudden that ability to consume has been taken away. And it will come back in different degrees, different elements, but this is an amazing opportunity for all of you to really think about, well, what is it important? What do I actually need versus what I really want? And so we're going to take a deeper dive into that psychological safety aspect that I talked about in the first webinar. So how many of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? If you can just give me a show of hands. Okay, good. So lots of information about Maslow's hierarchy of needs on the web. Please feel free to go and do further reading on it. I've kept it quite simple for today. And I want to call out that when you read about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he's very clear that there are certain things that need to be in place for this to work as a hierarchy. And importantly, those things are all around freedom. So freedom to operate, freedom of liberty, and freedom of speech. And right now, we haven't got all of that full in all buckets. So it's a good way to start using these as building blocks as we start to emerge from the impact of COVID-19. So let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. So we've got our physiological needs, apologies. We've got those basic things that we need: our food, our water, our shelter, our warmth, our clothing. Those are our very basic needs. And what I want you to do after today is really think about where you are in this, and do you have things in place? Following that, we've then got our security needs, so feeling safe, feeling protected, feeling stable. Then the next layer up is about that feeling of belonging, feeling part of something, that feeling of love, that feeling of friendship. You know, friendly people have friends, you know, so think about your friendships. And I know that a number of people have really struggled with working from home, not because they're at home, you know, it's nice to be at home, you can have a cup of coffee whenever you want it, all your things are here, but they're missing that part of walking into a physical bricks and mortar office in a morning and feeling part, you know, the logos that are on the walls, the chatting over the water cooler, and missing that sense of belonging. And I know that Microsoft Teams and Hangouts and all the rest of it has helped with that, but just pay attention to the fact that maybe that's why you may be not feeling 100% right now, but it will come back. The next layer up is around self-esteem, and this is about your respect, your status, and your pride. this is really important, and a couple of you asked about changing your career. So are you at a stage where you want to change your career? And you know, I've had a few conversations around this with people, that now you've had this moment of pause and reset, is what you're doing for a living actually what you want? And that's okay. It will come from an element of this hierarchy. It will ask you to question, and some people want to go into careers that give back. You know, if you think about the Thursdays clapping for our key workers and on our NHS, naturally those feelings are going to come up. You want to change in career, I would say go for it. I think map it out very carefully, but also the first step in any of this is make sure that you're talking to your current employers about how you're feeling and what your career aspirations are, because it's amazing how many people don't share that with an organization, then get missed out on a promotion or an opportunity that's coming up, and it's because they've assumed that people know. Don't assume. Make sure that you're sharing your hopes and aspirations with those around you that could maybe enable them. And all of this leads up to our self-actualization. This is our meaning, achievement and purpose. And I left you with 2 pieces of homework on the last webinar about really identifying what your purpose is, who you are and what your values are. And if you haven't done that piece of homework yet, I'd really recommend that you do. And if you haven't seen it, please go back and watch the webinar and think about taking the time to do those pieces of work. So I've added in here a career example for you. Just to make it easier to sit well with you. So the basic needs at the bottom start with your salary. So do you earn enough to pay for what you need to pay for in order to do what you need to do? The next level up, the security piece, is you're going to start looking about how you're going to feel secure in what you're doing. So you'll be looking at maybe the benefits package, your pension, your healthcare. Those belonging needs I've slightly alluded to, but your work friends, working in a positive atmosphere. The self-esteem element is around that job title and respect. And then the final piece, this self-actualization, is moving. Again, promotion's a bit of a difficult word, because actually one of the best decisions I made in my career was actually take a sideways move into a role that I really, really wanted. So promotion is about promoting you to be self-actualized rather than that physical step up. And I think as we emerge from the impact of COVID-19, a lot of job roles and responsibilities may change, they may merge, and so therefore think about what it promotes in you and your values and your purpose. So take some time after the webinar today to really think about what have you got in place and what's still missing for you in order to start to move towards your self-actualization. So what did you ask for? You asked for how do you create a growth mindset when you're just coping. Coping's okay. You are coping. We are all coping at the best of our ability. There's a lot to be proud of here. But I would think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and think about what you really need right now rather than what you really want. But be open to the fact that you can't control everything at the moment, and therefore approach it with positive growth mindset so you learn from this, because my goodness me, are we going to have some stories to tell on the other side of this, rather than hiding away from it and waiting for it to blow over. Talked about how to map out a change in career. Think about what it is you want to do some really sound research. There's some great stuff happening on social media at the moment. Have a look on LinkedIn about their top tips. Speak to IGD. There's an amazing, you know, the extra offers that you've got coming here. So really think about what it is that you want to do for your career and why. But I would ask you to go back to what are your values and what does it give you as far as getting to the top of that hierarchy of needs. How to create a growth mindset in others. So I took you through a few elements of that earlier, and how and when you should review your goals. Think about putting that solid block of time that's non-negotiable weekly into your calendar and use it as your space to grow. So before I move on to the Q&A, I'd just like to leave you with a quote and some top tips. So I've got a quote for you here. So time is free, but it's priceless. You can't own it, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. And once you've lost it, you can never get it back. So make the most of this time that you've got. Time is precious. So my 3 tips for you are: make space to grow in your week. Time is yours, so use it to the best of your ability. Don't let fear hold you back. See the opportunity to learn. Really think about what is the worst thing that can happen. And then finally, look after all of you. Think about what's going on with you. What are you worried about? Is it your money, your health, your career? And reach out for support. There's some incredible support out there right now. This will blow over and we will emerge from it. We will be different because we have learned and we've experienced it. But right here, right now, think about what you actually need and reach out to get the support that you need in order to feel your full self. Thank you.